Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video I'm going to be using the new improved BioCast from Elichem Resins to create a beautiful resin reed diffuser and tray set. If you're wondering what Elichem Resins have done to make BioCast even better than before, well, it's clearer, it's more UV resistant, but most importantly, it has a much higher plant-derived content in it, more than any other on the market. So if that sounds good to you, stay tuned and enjoy the video. Because BioCast has been developed using naturally derived raw materials, I thought it was only fitting that I used nature as my theme for today's project. We've had a glorious summer this year and finally our hydrangea plant flowered and we had many beautiful blue blossoms. And so about 2 weeks ago I decided it was time to preserve a few of them. Here you can see I'm just placing a couple of the hydrangea heads onto some silica sand. It's wise dry silica sand. And then I carefully fill the bucket up with more silica. Oh, there you go. I'm adding another one there as well. So yeah, I didn't want to do it too quickly because I didn't want the flowers to be put under too much pressure from the weight of the silica. It's best if you do it quite gradually rather than plonking it all on. And then once it was filled up, I put the lid on and I left it. 2 weeks later, they were perfectly preserved. Hydrangeas keep their colour really well and I was happy with how they turned out. And they were ready to spend the rest of their days preserved once again, but this time in BioCast resin. So the first thing you're going to see me making today is what you might call a large coaster or a small tray. You can call it whatever you like, but yeah, what you see is what you get. I don't care what you call it. It won't be used as a coaster as such. It's going to be used more like a display tray. So yeah, anyway, what I decided to do was brush the sides using a colour that was closest that I could find to the hydrangea. It's like a lilac-y blue colour. And of all the moulds that I have from Moulds and Shapes, 'cause that's where this is from, Moulds and Shapes, this is probably the one I've used the very most. It's called the Royal Coaster Mould. And if you're not new to my channel, you've probably seen me use it quite a lot before. It's just the right size, not too big, not too small. And once I'd finished doing that, I just blended in any loose powder and I wasn't too worried about keeping it tidy. And you'll see later that it really didn't matter. And now it's time for the resin. BioCast has a 1:1 mixing ratio by volume. So I poured in equal amounts of part A and part B into my measuring cups. It was 40 millilitres of each. I really didn't want much resin because I just wanted to coat the base of the mould. After measuring it out, I gave it a really good stir, and I wasn't too worried about the fact that it was getting quite bubbly because I was stirring it so quickly. Because I was pouring it in such a shallow layer, the bubbles would rise to the top very quickly and I would be able to get rid of them without any problem at all. I only worry too much about bubbles when it's a deep pour. Also, I already knew from experience that BioCast is quite a clear resin and it degasses by itself quite well anyway. So once it was thoroughly mixed, it was time to add some pigment as a background colour. I didn't want anything too dark, so I just went for some interference pink. So it's like a whitish pink that changes slightly as you look from different directions, and I thought that would be really nice. That pigment I think was from Resin Pro. So yeah, once that was all thoroughly mixed in, I could add that to my mould. So the main reason for this first very shallow layer is to anchor down the flowers. It does form kind of a nice coloured backdrop as well, but the main thing is to anchor down the flowers so that when I fill it up with clear resin the next day, the flowers won't float to the top. So here you can see as I move it around, it's kind of semi-transparent. It's not completely opaque, is it? Which is nice because you can just see the remainder of the powder at the base, you know, when I brushed it onto the mould, and I think it gives it a nice effect. So that was why I was quite pleased that I'd left that, you know, the excess powder there and brushed it all in. And I do think that made a big difference. So now it's ready. I just needed to make sure that there was no bubbles. I've got a very, very gentle torch. People always say, don't use a torch, you'll damage your mould. Well, I realise that, but only if it's a very strong torch and you're not being careful. I try my best not to go anywhere near the edges of the mould. So with that done, it was time to get creative and arrange my flowers. I cut off lots and lots of separate flowers from my hydrangea bloom and arranged them and moved them around and faffed around until I was happy. I'll put a bit of music on just for that bit. And there we had it, all the flowers arranged. There were a few that kept sticking up and not wanting to stay stuck down, but I knew that if I left the resin for a few hours to be semi-cured, I'd be able to press down, especially the leaf that kept sticking up. I would press that down and it would be more likely to stay stuck down. But at that point, I thought I'm just going to leave it. Anyway, I still had some of the interference white mixture left. And so as an afterthought, I thought, why not put it into the bottom of a jar mould and we can make something of the jar. And in the end, it ended up being my favourite part of the whole project. It's always the case. The afterthoughts always turn out the best. So here I'm just getting some more flowers off the bloom. And then I took some tweezers and started trying to arrange the flowers within the mould, which wasn't the easiest of jobs. It's something I've never tried before, but I thought it could look really, really good. And sorry, I'm a bit out of frame at the moment. You can't really see what I'm doing. But yeah, I was just getting as many in there as possible before adding my resin. So after I'd finished adding flowers, it was time to add that leftover resin. Once it was all poured in, I did give it a good squidge around to try and get all the flowers that were in there coated, and I was hoping that it would all just go down to the bottom of the mould and cure, and then I would fill it up. But I realised that probably wasn't going to be the best way of doing it. So what I decided to do, executive decision, after I'd finished pouring in that leftover resin, I mixed up some more BioCast. This time I kept it clear and I filled it up with the clear BioCast. I just felt that that was going to be the best way to go with this. You might be thinking to yourself, that doesn't look clear. Well, it was kind of. I did it in the same pot that the white had been in, so it wasn't completely clear. But it was also quite bubbly as well because I'd mixed it up in a rush. But anyway, you'll see when it comes out of the mould that it's absolutely fine. And the next job was to fill up my royal coaster mould with some more clear BioCast. And as you watch me doing that, you might notice that some of the petals are slightly protruding above the surface of the resin, but I wasn't too worried about that because my plan was to give it a top coat later on anyway, so I knew I would be able to sand it down and give it the top coat. And if you're wondering why I was already planning on giving it a top coat of the BioCast, it's just my preference. I find that giving the piece of artwork a top coat always makes it look smoother and clearer, and I just like the finished result so much more. And we will come back to this one later on. Let's have a look how the jar turned out when I got it out of the mould. What do you think? I was blown away by it. I love the overall effect I got from those flowers and that leftover resin with the interference white in it. Couldn't think what you called it. Actually, interference pink. Yeah, I love it. Oh my goodness. I was blown away by it, and that was just a afterthought, wasn't it? It's always the case for me. The things I make with my leftover resin always look the best. So at this stage I knew I wanted to make something more of it so it would be useful. I had an empty reed diffuser jar and I thought maybe that could be a plan. I took the screw top lid off of my old reed diffuser jar and thought of a plan for how I would be able to use that on my bigger jar, and I did manage to come up with a plan. So the jar mould that I used actually comes with a lid mould as well, which I didn't make in this instance because, I was just using my leftover resin. I didn't think I'd need a lid, but I did have a spare one that I'd made for another project. And so I took the measurements of the lid. There's the widest bit there you can see at the top, but then there's the smaller circles that go on the inside so that the lid stays on, as you can see there. So my plan was to use my laser cutter to cut a series of circles that could be stacked on top of each other to create a lid. And here are the circles being cut on my Wecreate Vista laser cutter. I'm using 3mm basswood. And quite honestly, this was a last minute idea, but it was so easy to do in the Wecreate software and it took me no time at all. Here you can see I've got them all arranged. This one I'm holding here is the one that will go on the base, and it's got a hole in the middle that's too small for that top to go through. And so that makes sure that the top will stay in place, and then I stack all the other ones on top with glue, obviously, to stick them together, and that's as simple as it is. So while all of those are getting stuck together, let me tell you what I think of the new improved recipe for the BioCast resin. Well, first of all, working with something that you know to be so much more environmentally friendly sets you off to a good start straight away. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know or understand the process of what goes into making bioresins. I read the data sheets and they went straight over my head. But what I can tell you is that I feel so much better about purchasing resin which has a high plant-derived content. It's good for your environmental consciousness. Creativity should be enjoyable. And you can't enjoy the process if you have worries about the environmental impacts. So I started off with a positive mindset, but how does it perform on a more practical level? Well, as you know, it's a 1-to-1 resin and it's for shallow pouring. However, you have seen that I did fill a jar mould with it and it was absolutely fine. I can't tell you how clear it would have been if I'd just stuck with clear resin, but it still worked fine and I don't see any problems with it. But yeah, it's supposed to be a shallow pour resin. The clarity of the tray, which you will see very soon, was exceptional, especially considering the fact that it had flowers in there, because flowers do always cause some extra air bubbles, but it was an amazing clear finish and it didn't go in my pressure pot either. So yeah, I was very impressed with the clarity. As far as the UV resistance goes, I couldn't really tell you. You need to do a time test, I suppose, to know how, the yellowing and the UV side of it would go. But yeah, it's supposed to be a lot more UV resistant than it was before, so that's good. There was no smell to it and it did cure quite quickly in about 6 hours, but that will always depend on the environment that you're working in. If it's very cold, it will take longer. But overall, I am very impressed and I would highly recommend it. Right, let's get back to the project. As you just saw, the lid went together beautifully and I was so happy with that. I'm definitely going to be making more of those. So today, instead of showing you the demoulding, I decided to do the reveal in a different way. So as you already knew, I was going to be sanding it and giving it a top coat. So I decided to reveal its beauty that way. I'm just giving it a little bit of a sand because some of the petals were sticking up a little bit and it wasn't a smooth surface. And also when you're doing a top coat, it does help if you give it a little bit of a sanding before applying that flood coat on top. So I mixed up some more BioCast. I think it was probably about 20 mils. You don't need much when you're just doing a top coat. And yeah, let's see the reveal. I think it's good that I decided to do a flood coat on top because it means that you get to see its clarity a lot better because there was no pigment added. And look, doesn't that look clear? Yeah, I was so happy with how this one turned out. It's so beautiful as well with those flowers in. So yeah, as soon as I've finished spreading it all up to the sides, we'll have a good close-up look. And here we go. Isn't that lovely? I think it's that negative space there is perfect for the placement of the reed diffuser when it's all cured. So I think that's beautiful. I was really happy with the results of this project and really impressed with the BioCast. So after adding the flood coat, I had a little bit left, so I decided to put some on the top of the lid as well, and that did make a big difference. It really brought the grain of the wood out and made it look so much nicer. Okay, we're nearing the end now. All that is left to do is to make the reed diffuser oil, which I had never done before, but I wanted to have a go. And already it's looking good, isn't it? Really nice. I was so pleased with that lid. Anyway, let's make some oil. Well, not make the oil. Let's put the oil in. It's almond oil, sweet almond oil. And yeah, I had to do a bit of research to learn how to do this because I really wasn't sure. And it turned out that to about half a cup of sweet almond oil, which is about half of the size of the jar, you need about 30 drops of essential oils. I went a bit over because I always do. But yeah, I think I had about 15 drops of each. I did lavender oil, geranium oil and myrrh. So it was a bit of a strange mixture, but that's what I had. And actually it smells really nice. So with all the oils added, I used my diffuser reeds to stir it all up, and then I turned them over when I put them back in so that most of the surface area of the reeds was coated, and that's what they tell you to do, so that's what I did. I think I've got 5 or 6 reeds there. And yeah, you do have to buy actual reeds. People seem to think you can use things like not cocktail sticks, like kebab skewers, but you can't. You need to actually buy the proper reeds for a reed diffuser. So I did. And yeah, it looks really good, doesn't it? And here's the tray. I added a ribbon and a bead on the little handle bit there to just finish it off. And it's quite a success, isn't it? I'm really pleased with it. So let's look at it all together. Perfect. They look like they were always planned to go together like that, don't they? You wouldn't have thought that jar was a complete afterthought. I'm very happy with the finished results, and I hope you like it too. If you do like what I've made today, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you would like to. So that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time. Bye for now.